dear brothers and sisters. Today, on the Ash Wednesday, we begin a liturgical period which is very, very important in the life of a Catholic faithful. It is a period of 40 days without counting Sundays before the Easter celebrations. This period is called Lent. In these 40 days, we should first of all think of the 40 years the Jews lived in the desert during their exodus from Egypt, the land of slavery, to Canaan, the land full of milk and honey, the promised land. We read that in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2. Secondly, 40 days and 40 nights remind us of Moses who fasted while interceding for the Jews, the Israelites. We read this also in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 18. Third, the 40 days and 40 nights that the prophet Elijah walked towards Mount Horeb, running away from Jezebel. We read this in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 8. And lastly, we think of the 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus fasted in the desert just after his baptism. We read this episode in Matthew chapter 4, verse 2, and even you can find it in Mark chapter 1, verse 13. Of course, we should not dwell so much in looking at the hidden meaning or the sense of this number 40, but rather we should be faithful to God who chose to work with this number 40. And actually, the choice of God shows that He is the God who reigns over time. And therefore, it is a period or a moment, a test of time, a moment that unveils something. It is a time of meeting God, who is the master of the time. It is a time to unite ourselves with God even much more. It is a time to purify ourselves, cleansing ourselves. It is a time to walk closer to God. It is a time for a spiritual maturity, a time to grow in faith. Then why the ashes on our foreheads? You have to understand that the ashes in the biblical setup or the biblical world symbolizes the fragility of man. We read in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, and also in chapter 3, verse 19, that man was created from dust, and so he's fragile, just as the dust. Ashes are put on our head to remind us of our spiritual fragility, our spiritual weakness caused by sin. Hence, the need for conversion. The Jews, in their penitential rites, were putting on sackcloth and rolling themselves in ashes. This was to attract God's mercy. We are sinners. Therefore, by the sign of ashes on our foreheads, we are looking for God's mercy. We are, therefore, in the conversion process. The process of conversion is best lived in the life of 1. Prayer, 2. Charity or almsgiving, and 3. Fasting. These are the 3 pillars of this period of Lent. These are the three fundamental Christian obligations. But this triple approach of conversion, these pillars of this period of Lent, must not obtain for us the glory of man, as Jesus tells us in the today's gospel from Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 6, and again 16 to 18. We should not look to please people in our prayer, in almsgiving, and also in our fasting. This is to say, I do not fast for my own benefit. For example, I do not fast to cut weight and remain fit. I do not help others through almsgiving so as to caress my own ego. I do not pray looking for personal uh, gains or personal graces alone. Brief, it is a question of going back to God, returning to the Lord, as Prophet Joel tells us in today's first reading. Going back to the Lord through prayer, for we shall be having the way of the cross during this period every Friday. This is a public way as a communion within the church, but each one can look for the way of going back to God through prayer. Prayer, a communion with God. Prayer, talking, dialoguing with God. Prayer, experiencing the greatness of God. Going back to the Lord through almsgiving. For God is incarnate in the needy. He tells us when we read Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. Going back to the Lord through fasting. For abstinence is the pathway to purity in life. For us who look for pureness in life, fasting is its key. Fasting is the way to attain purity, chaste life, chaste life. Therefore, brothers and sisters, besides prayer strengthening our relationship with God, almsgiving strengthen our relationship with one another, with other people, and fasting strengthens our relationship with the nature, the environment around us. These were the temptations Jesus went through in his 40 days in the desert. The 40 days and 40 nights experience in the desert helped Jesus strengthen his relationship with God the Father. He was tested on that. We read in Luke chapter 4, verse 7 to 8. 40 days and 40 nights strengthened Jesus' relationship with others, which was tested when the devil asked him to fall on the angels, which are others, will come and help him. And lastly, this is a moment that even Jesus strengthened his relationship with the environment when the devil tempted him about the stone, change the stone into bread. And he was capable of strengthening his relationship with the environment in so far as not falling into that temptation. But unfortunately, at times, not like Jesus, who withstood until the end the temptations, we fall. And that is why we are fragile, we fall. And therefore, we need to reconcile ourselves with God. This is the message that St. Paul is addressing to us in the second reading from 2 Corinthians. Dear brothers and sisters, Lent means repent and believe in the gospel, as the priest will be putting the sign of the cross with the ash on your forehead. May the Lord, full of mercy, watch over you in this Lenten period. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.